follow them outside. Emme wiped a trickle of sweat from her temple and impatiently removed her stylish brown top hat. It was a new Castle's boutique creation, and her mother had added it to Emme's burgeoning accessory collection. "Emme!" Veronica, the London SRO's vice president, beckoned from the far end of the balcony. "There are hundreds already outside. Come quickly." Emme smiled grimly and tossed the hat on an empty chair. Bigger crowds meant better exposure. The committee's attempt at the underhanded manoeuvre would not be tolerated. It was simply unacceptable. The SRO and its supporters would be heard, make no mistake. She slung the long strap of her bag over her shoulder and across her body as she ran down the stairs, navigating her way through the crowd. People moved aside or patted her on the back or shouted words of encouragement. She wore breeches, boots, and a matching blouse and outer corset that her mother had demanded she treat carefully, as the material was the boutique's newest addition from the Orient. Hester Castle O'Shea insisted that Emme be impeccably dressed, even when wearing trousers, but her fussing efforts were lost on her daughter. Emme was rarely still, and she ruined her clothing more often than not. The evening air was cool, and night was quickly descending on the square, where the Predatory Shifter Regulations Committee had concluded their clandestine meeting. People spilled out of the hall and crossed the short distance to a row of government buildings. Veronica found her and grabbed her hand, pulling her forward at a run. "I worry we'll not be able to control this one," Veronica shouted. "I've spied at least 2 ne'er-do-well gangs spoiling for a fight." Emme winced as the crowd's energy pushed at her from all sides. She forced herself to block it out. She couldn't afford to be overwhelmed by it now. "Law enforcement are already watching," she shouted back to Veronica. "Let us hope they'll manage them. And leave us alone." Emme finished her thought as she pictured one very angry detective inspector who always was on hand to interfere with her duties as London SRO president. Oliver Reed was the bane of her existence, and she ran faster toward the wagon, situated across the street from the committee buildings. She must hurry if she wanted to make herself seen or heard outside before he arrived. She clambered up on the empty wagon bed, pulling Veronica along with her. They were joined by 3 other SRO members, who flanked Emme on all sides. She waved her arms at the crowd. "Steady!" she shouted. "We do not accost individuals." She looked over the crowd as night continued to close in and gas lamps flickered to light. The sheer size of the gathering would make the morning headlines, and she hoped their efforts would be rewarded with success. Then she spied several buckets of rotten vegetables and mentally apologized to her mother for the inevitable ruination of her custom material. Constables emerged through the crowd and began erecting a temporary barricade to keep the crowd under control. Emme watched their efforts with skepticism, but knew that many of them identified with the population gathered, and thus were unlikely to be hurt or accosted. If they hadn't been present for official duty, they might well have been part of the protesting crowd. The crowd suddenly roared and booed, and she whipped her attention to the building entrance. Bryce Randolph, the committee chairman, was only just visible as members of his security detail guided him quickly to one of 2 carriages that had pulled alongside the curb. Other committee members emerged, and the crowd roared. Emme flinched involuntarily as refuse began to fly, winging across the square and thunking against the carriages, the street, and the buildings. "Not part of our plan," Veronica yelled as they ducked down. She was right. It hadn't been part of their plan, this time. The fact that they had done it before, at carefully chosen venues and functions, seemed to lend permission for people to hurl garbage each time they protested anywhere. "If we are separated," Emme shouted to the others in the wagon, "meet back at the offices." "Suppose we are arrested again," one of the others yelled. Emme laughed breathlessly, dodging to avoid a rotten tomato that flew past her head to splatter on one of the carriages. "Sit comfortably while I secure bail money," she shouted back. "Never fear, we've endured worse." The wagon tipped, nudged forward by the encroaching